Loma Linda.
Miss a show, miss a lot.
Psst. Hey, you. Yeah, you. Do you know where you are? Well, you've done it now. You're listening to KCAA Loma Linda, your CNBC news station. So expect the unexpected.
Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Justice Watch with Attorney Zulu Ali. I am Attorney Zulu Ali with the Justice Watch crew. Michael Bilal Clark, Dr. Akil Bashir, and Rosa Nunez. This week, like every week, we will be discussing critical legal issues impacting our communities. And the topics today is where we'll be talking about the issue of the most recent Kavanaugh situation about the confirmation of his Supreme Court nomination by Donald Trump, and the impact of the allegations by Dr. Ford. We'll also be talking about the issue of Dallas, with the Dallas police officer had actually the Dallas police officer actually is accused of homicide on an individual after allegedly entering the wrong apartment. And then we'll be talking about the issue of mentorship. And joining us today is one of our guests. He had actually been with us a few weeks ago. His name is DeMarcus Ross. DeMarcus attended Irvine Valley College and majored in child development and minored in psychology. He has a certificate in sports medicine. He's actually a personal trainer, a YouTuber, a youth sports coach, as well as a youth activist. So thank you for joining us, Marcus.
Glad to be here, sir. Thank you.
So I think to start out, I think I'm going to talk a little bit about the Kavanaugh situation and the allegations and the accusations that have unfolded since his nomination. And I'm just going to give you my analysis on the situation and kind of going back and trying to figure out where we are on that. Mm-hmm. So basically, I believe that after Kavanaugh, I think he appeared on a short list for a U.S. Supreme Court justice to replace Justice Anthony Kennedy around July of this year. Mm-hmm. And prior to being put on this short list back in July, there is a individual by the name of Dr. Christine Ford. She's actually, I think she's in the academia here in California. And basically what she has alleged was that while her and Judge Kavanaugh were in high school, or they were high school students in Maryland, they both went to a party, and while they were at a party, she alleges that she was pushed into a bedroom and that Kavanaugh, who she describes as being inebriated, pinned her to a bed while his friend Mark Judge was watching and laughing. And then Kavanaugh begins to grope her, try to take off her clothes, and place his hand over her mouth. And while she was trying to scream, trying to scream, and then Ford, which was Kavanaugh's friend, jumped on top of them or something. And then that's when she was able to escape. And she said that she had not spoken about it for the incident for years, and then she believed that the incident happened in the summer of 1982 when she was 15 years old and Kavanaugh would have been 17 years old. Now, where we're at with the allegations, of course, you have two, like everything else, I mean, you've got two sides weighing in on the issue. Mm-hmm. You have the Democratic Party weighing in on the issue, stating that, look, you know, this is a serious allegation. We need to get involved in investigating the issue and figure out exactly what's going on as far as the allegations are concerned, because obviously they feel that this type of allegation, very serious, very important, and you're talking about someone who has been nominated to the top judge in the country. That well, he wouldn't be the Chief Justice, but he would be on the highest court, right? Mm-hmm. And obviously, an allegation like this is significant. You're talking about someone who's going to have significant, makes decisions on extremely important things that affect all of us. And so they feel like it's really important that, this thing is investigated and that his nomination should be scrutinized more based upon this recent allegation. Then you have the Republican Party who are alleging that, look, this is a situation where you have an individual who has who is basically coming out for something that happened back in the early 1980s. She's not even really sure exactly what year the incident took place, alleging that someone had raped her. She wasn't, this happened so long ago, she don't even remember allegedly exactly where this incident had actually happened. And that it seems like it's all purely political, that basically the reasons why that she's waiting so long to come out right now, right at the point where he's being selected to the U.S. Supreme Court, is all political. They're trying to wait for the elections in November, trying to halt or at least delay it so they can somehow, some way prevent his confirmation to the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, I mean, I think that from an objective analysis, the first thing that we have to, this really boils down to one issue. It's called truth, right? Is she telling the truth? And of course, you have a lot of individuals who are coming out saying that there's no way that she could be telling the truth. It's so long ago, it's all political, and she's just trying to delay, the process. Just go ahead and let him be selected let the process go forward as far as his confirmation is concerned. And when you're thinking about the issue of truth, and I can just tell you when it comes to sexual assault allegations, I'm going to try to approach it from my professional experience, and that being, a police officer. I've been involved in investigating cases involving sexual assaults. As a private investigator working for defense counsels, I've investigated sexual assaults, and as a criminal defense attorney, I've defended people in sexual assault cases. The sexual assault cases, especially sexual assault cases where you have a long period of time between the time of the alleged incident and the time that the person actually comes out with the allegations, they're very difficult cases because really it boils down, clearly there's no, 99.9% of the time there is no physical evidence. Oftentimes there probably aren't really any witnesses. And so it's a really difficult situation. So the question is, how do you proceed with this type of allegation? Well, first of all, she is requested. Well, and we also need to go back and say that she's taken a polygraph test that they say that she's already passed. Then you have to go back and say, well, typically in these cases, or what she's asking for is for an investigation, right? Kind of like in the Anita Hill case where you had the Clarence Thomas situation where she came out. I think there was a FBI investigation involved. And so I think that would be appropriate. Obviously, it's a very serious allegation. You're talking about a situation where someone is alleging that they've been sexually assaulted. We're not talking about a situation with Clarence Thomas where we're talking about someone who might have made inappropriate sexual advances. I mean, we're talking about an outright allegation of a criminal offense, of a felony. And so I think that it would be appropriate for an investigation to take place. She's asking for the investigation, and the thing about the investigation, which you have the Republican Party tends to kind of be opposed to that and think it's a delay. I think that if I was Kavanaugh, I would want an investigation, and the reason why I tell you that is because typically when there is an allegation of sexual assault and there's a long period of time, usually the investigation goes to the advantage of the accused, because there is no physical evidence.
Exactly.
Right? So what are they going to find? They're probably going to speak with her. They're going to speak with the individuals who may or may not have been in the house, chances are they're going to deny it or they didn't see anything. And so in the final analysis, I believe that it's probably going to go in his favor. I do not believe the investigation may necessarily help her at this point.
Right.
But I believe that it's important that they probably go forward with the investigation, because you do not want to confirm someone on the U.S. Supreme Court with this type of allegation until it's actually fully investigated. And if it's not fully investigated, then what you're going to potentially have is an ongoing distraction with a U.S. Supreme Court justice.
Exactly.
And we've seen how that's played out with the President of the United States. He can't really get anything done because it's just scandal after scandal after scandal, right? So now we've got a situation where we have a significant part of the public and the world who is distrustful of the President of the United States. Do you really want to have a situation where you're going to confirm a U.S. Supreme Court justice, and throughout his term, which is a lifetime term, consistent criticism of having someone who themselves is, until this thing is finalized, someone who has basically been accused of committing a crime, who's going to be making many decisions, many of which will have an impact on the rights of women, being, we know that's getting ready to come up. So, obviously you're going to have some significant criticism about saying, hey, look, you got a rapist trying to make that decision. He has no respect for women anyway.
Exactly.
Then you're going to have other criminal cases and other cases that are going to be coming before the Supreme Court where he's going to consistently be scrutinized and criticized by the public. And nobody's going to have any respect for his opinion to begin with.
Exactly.
So for me, I would think that from a completely unbiased and an objective perspective, I believe that if he's smart, if the party is smart, they would allow the investigation to go forward. Because what is it going to unveil? So if you go through the investigation is complete, and after the investigation, there's no smoking gun that would suggest that basically he's a rapist, and now you have to go completely based upon the credibility of each witness. You have two stories, his story and her story. He says it didn't happen. She says it did. And then the Senate is going to listen to it, and it boils down to the trier of facts discretion to determine who has the credibility. And if they find out that, he's more credible, or that she failed to meet his burden, so to speak, although we're not talking about a criminal case, then I believe that you're going to have a better outcome either way. I do want to make it also comment on the fact that she did take a polygraph test, and as we know, polygraphs are in most states are not admissible in criminal court, but in many civil courts they are admissible. Polygraphs are. The second thing is that she did come out, according to what the Post had written, that they're back in 2012 at a couples therapy. She had came out and told her therapist about the incident about 6 years ago. So arguably it's just not something that just came out of the clear blue sky. It's something that she spoke about earlier, which significantly adds to potentially her credibility if she said it before. I think that kind of is something that is really relevant if she spoke about this before at couples therapy and said that she was, sexually molested by someone or sexually assaulted by someone, during that period of time, who, from what I also understand, she had mentioned back in 2012 that this individual was a judge, right? Which point, although she may not have used Kavanaugh's name specifically, I'm not sure, but we do know that it did that it was mentioned that that person was a judge. So, so my thing is that we're dealing with a lot of things. Now we've talked a little bit about the formalities of it, but I think that we also probably need to mention the fact that we can't dismiss the fact that there's. Do you think that if it was somebody other than Kavanaugh, let's say it was President Obama had made a nomination to a Supreme Court justice for a Supreme Court justice. You know, they blocked every one of them, all of his selections. Well, let's just say that he had selected someone to the U.S. Supreme Court, and that the same allegation came out. Do you think that the Republicans would treat it the same way?
Oh, most definitely they would. I mean, in terms of just trying to do the investigation and stuff, of course they would try to do that. I mean,
and when you say the same way, you're saying they would do like the Democrats are doing now.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah, most definitely. You know, I agree with you 100%. You know, you can look at it two ways. You know, you can say it's the Democrats that are stalling or whatever, but whenever you look at the serious nature of this allegation, you know, and I was just going over the notes and stuff, she did mention by last night. So it was 6 years prior to this year that she did mention him. So it does have some type of validity to it, and it can't go overlooked. You know, it has to be something that has to be looked into. Like you say, I mean, and when you're looking at the public has already swayed against him because basically she didn't took the lie detector test, she didn't mention in therapy, and so the public didn't already favored, you know, her side of the story. So to allow it to linger over, it's just going to be a detriment. And I believe that if he's, like you say, if he's innocent of this, go ahead and go through. What does he have to lose? You know, even when you look at the evidence, although she mentioned it, there's no physical evidence of it. You know, I mean, but to have it to continue to linger over, whether it's a stall tactic or not, it needs to be something that needs to be cleared up. You know, and nobody else, you know, that comes along, whether it's Democrat or Republican, should not allow it to continue to go on. You know, you go back to, you know, even if you want to bring up the Bill Cosby case, you know, it hasn't been left unturned. You investigated that, you went back and seen that. So I think the same methodology should apply to this case as well, regardless of his status or not.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I believe you guys 110%. I mean, the biggest thing here is, I mean, at least for me, I'm not the biggest political person, but I can understand that it's not even a matter of being Republican or Democrat at this point. It's a question of character.
Exactly.
And if someone is questioning your character and it needs to be investigated, if you have nothing to hide in your character, then let the investigation in, let everything fall as it may. So at this point, yeah, go through with the investigation. If there's nothing to hide, then all will be well. But if not, then you have a whole different story on your hands.
Yeah, I think they would be foolish to allow a confirmation without a full investigation by the FBI. I mean, that really doesn't make any sense. And I mean, I know that being it's you know, we're talking about a completely different animal because we're not talking about someone who's accused of a criminal offense. And obviously, you know that if he was accused, he is being accused, but not formally accused.
Right.
And that basically, obviously, you're going in most circumstances, if you're not talking about someone who is trying to be confirmed to sit on the highest court of the land, you're going to always say, don't say nothing. You're being accused of committing a criminal act. You don't need to go in public and make a statement. Because the funny thing about criminal cases, and I know this firsthand, I mean, I'm a staunch believer that of the presumption of innocence. And I'm not saying that he did it. And I'm not saying he didn't do it. I'm saying that the process should play out, and you can't let something like, but how many people are accused of committing crimes are actually they're seeking to confirm to sit on the U.S. Supreme Court. So it's not that changes the game, and that changes the analysis as to what he needs to do as far as that's concerned. But I mean, I think that it would be foolish to allow this process to go forward. They're going to allow her to speak. I think she said that she's going to be questioned or interviewed on Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. And he's going to be interviewed sometimes after that. But yet and still, I don't believe that they should allow this thing to go forward without there being some sort of investigation.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, but you know, I looked at the news not too long ago where they was trying to make the comparison of the Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill, right? And I believe those were just sexual advancements. Am I correct?
Right.
Whereas in this case, there was actual some type of physicalness to it. You know, where you pinned someone down, you held them down. You put this was violence within itself. You see what I'm saying? It wasn't like it was just a sexual advancement or whatever. This was violence, that was perpetuated in this case. So I think that it really needs to be looked into.
Oh, yeah. Most definitely. Yeah, I think that basically with the situation related to Anita Hill, we're talking about something that's quite a bit different because you're talking about someone who's being sexually harassed. Although being sexually harassed is just as bad.
Oh,
in many
no
ways.
doubt,
Right.
no doubt.
But at the same time, I think when you're talking about someone who literally says that someone forced them somewhere, put their hands over their mouth and tried to molest them. There's also those who talk about the timeline. They say, it happened so long ago. And depending on what state you are, there's various timelines with regards to the statute of limitations for sexual assault cases. But as we know, in the state of California and many other states, 17 years old, you're going to be, there's people still in prison for sexual assaults that took place much longer than that. They charge people as adults. So just assuming that it was somebody else, I mean, they might, they would be, my opinion would be that if it had been somebody that was nominated by Barack Obama, they would be talking about trying to prosecute him criminally.
Right.
So there's a significant double standard to that. And I actually have had many of my friends on the other side of the aisle who had the audacity to ask me the question about, this is unfair because there's so many black men who went to prison, for, these types of allegations without due process. And that's true, but it seems like the mood and the narrative changes when it's against you. You see what I mean?
Yes.
And so, but as far as the subject is concerned, I mean, it would be, and we're hearing so many different things and so many different, ideas about the whole sexual assault things and people who are accused of crimes and this Me Too thing, and how things are going on. But I believe this is different. I think that kind of the people trying to bootstrap issues that don't really apply to this particular situation. Again, like I said, I think that we need to separate some of our own, people are trying to put their backyard situations and connect it to this or something but we are talking about, and I don't think people understand the significance of someone being appointed to the United States Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And then if you do that, you're going to be questioning the integrity of the Supreme Court itself. And I think that now that once you lose confidence in our, I don't think that the office of the president will ever have the same status that it had before.
Oh, no.
After this.
No doubt about
Here
it.
in this country or around the world. I think that we basically have, taken something and minimized it to, something that people don't, it's like, they'll allow that individual to be the president of the United States. I mean, and I don't even think they really understand it. But I think that what it does is I think that it kind of exposes, the motive. And what I mean by that is exposing the fact of what people really think.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So and so many times, I mean, it's kind of funny because we always talk about how we're trying to. You don't understand this. We're always trying to convince people, and now it's almost like you're getting to a point where you know that you can never convince people like that.
Yeah.
You cannot. Anyone who at this point in time does not recognize the fact that this individual is very toxic for this country, then there is no, convincing them.
Yeah.
At all.
And I think that when you look at the president, himself, I think a lot of countries just look at us as a joke now. I mean, we always had this image as Americans. We always had this image that we live up to. But now I think these other countries are looking over and saying, "Look, this is a big joke." And then you're probably having people who will sit back and say, "Well, okay, if the president can get by with all the crap that he's getting by, sure enough, this Supreme Court judge can do the same thing." It fits into the same category. And I think we have a caller.
Really?
Yeah, we think we have the caller.
Hello, caller.
Yeah, Yes, good afternoon. I just really believe we have two set of rules in America, in the United States of America. And believe me, the people who belie saying that, looking at us as a joke, they already know the masses of the people think the way the President of the United States speaks. Here we are, we have a man sitting at the highest office of the land. He has sexually assaulted women. I mean, and he got elected. I mean, it's his voice, him saying, all you got to do is if you got some juice, you're a celebrity, you grab her by a crotch with, this, that, throw your tongue down the throat. That's sexual assault. In any land that I know of, and the real reason, and I know you guys on point, but what I'm saying is, this is just a dog and pony act. This guy gonna get elected because there's a lot of people around Trump that think like him, do what he's doing, done what he's doing. This guy here, he's sexually assaulted the lady. We know that's wrong. And the reason why I say it's two sets of rules, Bolton Jean, this man in his own house, white officer can go there, kill this man, say she thought it was she was in her house, and now they make him out of the villain. He is the villain now, and here she is. They said the most this case is if it's not an accident, it was where she used bad discretion. So and nowhere in this United States, these 52 states, where a black officer, I don't care if you're white I don't care if you're a woman or a man, could go in a white civilian's house and kill them, and your ass, and your butt say that you did not know. It's nowhere in this land. It's like, so it's, and then the one that's killed is the villain, and he has no bad record. He's a professional man. That just shows you how they flip the script. But we can't be mad at them because they're taking care of their own. Yeah. We just got to start taking care of our own. Yeah. And that's all I have to say. Okay. And I appreciate y'all accepting my call.
All right. Thank you for calling.
All right.
Yeah. And speaking of that, I think that the police officer in Dallas, I think her name was Amber Geiger, right? So basically what she says is that basically she gets off of her shift. She goes home to, and this is in Dallas, Texas. She lives in a place called Southside Flats, which is, I was told, or at least the information that I have, is not far from her where she worked as far as the police headquarters. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's my understanding. She lives on one floor, and I don't know how it's set up, but my understanding is that you park on the floor or the level that your apartment is on, and then you go to it. So my understanding is I think that she might have lived on the second floor, but she parked on the third floor, the third level, and went to an apartment. She goes to this apartment. She says that basically she goes there, it's ajar. She goes in, she sees a silhouette, and that she shoots at the silhouette. So now here we got another problem. I wish I had more time. So here's what you got to understand is that basically you walk into an apartment. But there's other things, but I'm just saying just purely if you believe what she had to say. Yeah. She walks into an apartment. She sees a silhouette. They don't abide by her commands. Then what happens? Now, clearly seeing someone burglarizing an apartment does not in and of itself rise to the level of deadly force, right? Seeing a silhouette in an apartment does not automatically arise to the use of deadly force. Right. Someone not responding to your commands does not rise to the level of deadly force, right? So nothing that she said so far would support her use of deadly force. So we see officers give people commands. They do not comply with those commands. So basically what you do is you use non-deadly force, that being macing, stun gunning, whatever you have, baton, baton, whatever you have to do, you use that method in order to do what you have to do. I'm assuming that she was at that point in time trying to take someone into custody. Also, if she's giving someone commands, and I'm assuming she still had her radio on, Then did she call on the radio and ask for backup? Did she, apparently she didn't, because she made a 911 call.
Right.
So my thing is that now, of course, it's being investigated by the Texas Rangers, which is not unusual, because obviously you need an independent source to do the investigation, because you don't want the agency itself investigating its own, right? Which is fine. But the problem is that she's being charged with some degree of manslaughter. Now, clearly it's a homicide, and now we're trying to figure out whether it's voluntary manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, first-degree murder, second-degree murder. And my understanding is she's being charged with, I'm assuming because of it, I'm assuming it's like maybe negligent homicide. But clearly it's not, it's a murder.
It's a murder.
Yeah,
It's not, and she's got a $300,000 bond after walking into someone's apartment, walking into the wrong apartment and shooting somebody is a murder, period. There's no way that, and she makes a $300,000 bond. Now, what do you do? What does this do? This does what we've been talking about before. It basically has an impact on the community's trust of law enforcement, right?
Exactly.
Because clearly, if anybody goes to the wrong, you go to the wrong apartment and you shoot somebody, that you clearly intended to shoot them because you pulled out your weapon. So there's no issue about, I was cleaning my gun and it went off. Clearly the act was an intentional act. You took the life of another human being. That's murder all day, every day.
Right.
Exactly.
And the fact that she's being charged with manslaughter, there is really no justification for that at all. It based clearly on what she said that she saw happen. Now, if they are going to give her some sort of special treatment, then Dallas police need to also open themselves up for civil liability.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
So, so now if you're going, either she's going to be a murderer, if her being a law enforcement officer, wearing a uniform and being tired at night is going to be a justification for reducing the charges to manslaughter, then I feel like the department should also be liable. And their whole idea, the reason they're doing it the way they're doing it, is so that they can avoid their own personal, for the department not being liable for what she did.
Exactly.
But I think that now, instead of giving it to another agency, doing those sort of things, but I believe that the agency should also be liable for what happened. If I have no idea why they would. If any human being walks into the wrong apartment and shoots another person, nobody's going to buy that.
Right.
Exactly. I had one of my tenants in my apartment complex. He says, Mike, he just came out and asked this question. He said, Mike, he says, I see you come home tired. Some days you be telling me you be working 12 and 13 hours, and you how old? Or almost 50 years old? He said, you come home tired every day, right? He said, how many times you walked in the wrong apartment? And I ain't never walked in the wrong apartment. And then the other thing that if you look at it, they was doing an investigation and they were showing how the doors in this apartment complex are. They automatically, because they're on this type of hinge, they automatically close behind them, And I mean, like you say, you can't equate that to no manslaughter. You in your own home and you get slaughtered, you get killed in your own home. Ain't nowhere in the world that should come out as being no manslaughter. You ain't on nobody else's property, and you get killed. That's clear. That's clearly murder. Period.
Right.
No, I definitely agree with that. I mean, the mere fact that someone can come into a place that is not their own and shoot an individual, what does this open the door to now if this lady is not tried the way she actually should be? What does this now open the door to where anybody can come into anybody's household, shoot, and then now they're not giving the full ramifications of their actions or the full consequences? That's a very serious situation.
Because I know that basically manslaughter is actually a defense or utilized under certain circumstances. One is what they call imperfect self-defense, where someone may believe that they're trying to defend themselves, but it wasn't justified, right? And then you have a heat of passion, where someone finds a lover with another lover or something like that. But the problem, of course, in this case is that it's not an imperfect self-defense because we don't hear, she does not have any allegation that would suggest that she thought that her life was necessarily in danger as far as him having a weapon or something like that. She just said that she saw a large silhouette that she thought was a burglar that didn't respond to her commands. That does not rise to that level. So it doesn't even under the mitigating circumstances of heat of passion or imperfect self-defense, it still doesn't rise to that level, and it's clearly a situation where she should be charged with murder without question. So.
And do you remember the case? And I was just looking it up. The case where the black police officer or the Arab, where he was Mohammed Noor or something in Minneapolis or something, who actually killed the white Australian lady. He was charged.
He was a Somalia.
Yeah, he
officer?
was. Yeah, he was charged.
Yeah, I mean this is clearly a double standard, as the caller was talking about earlier. The whole double standard about, and these are two examples of it.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Where you're talking about an individual. There's no telling what, I don't know what's going to come out of the investigation. I know that they're going to have cameras and stuff like that they're trying to get, but I mean this is just. It absolutely makes, and the outcry has to clearly be, although you have an officer that had done something, this egregious, and the question is that when it comes to criminal offenses and criminal allegations, police officers should not be treated no different than anyone else.
Yeah.
So the delay, number one, in her arrest, because and then once you realize that basically she did commit a homicide, and the homicide clearly was not something that was justifiable based upon her own statements, then immediately she should have been treated like anybody else who had committed a homicide. And she clearly, it was not an accidental shooting. She pulled out her weapon and shot somebody intentionally. It's clearly a murder.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're allowing her to be charged with manslaughter at this point, when this man's life was taken for no other reason than just sitting in his apartment, that is just absolutely crazy. If someone was under the influence of alcohol and walked to and went to the wrong house and went into the wrong house, when they went into the wrong house, they shot 2 or 3 people in the house. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That it's the same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's crazy. It's going to be interesting. I mean, of course, there's so much. People are really interested in this case for so many different reasons, but one of the major reasons, obviously, has to do with the fact that. There's more to it than probably what's coming out. Everybody's waiting because nobody's
waiting.
It's the most bizarre situation that you could ever hear of, where somebody goes into the wrong apartment and not know they're in the wrong apartment. And that's crazy. She can't be that tired.
But my thing is, why did they want to drug test the body opposed to drug testing her?
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, it doesn't really make any difference what he was on.
Yeah,
because that's not like how is that going to defend? I mean, what is the defense? I mean, what is the purpose of trying to see what
exactly, because it wasn't like he launched at her or nothing. Yeah,
you know what I mean? I mean, that just makes no sense. I mean, I could see testing him if he was in the wrong apartment.
Yeah, but that's just a smart campaign. Yeah,
I mean, so it don't really matter.
They're trying.
Yeah.
And they're trying to say what he had some weed in his apartment or something.
Yeah.
Like that really matters. So now they do what they usually do, and they try to do the character assault situation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To try to justify, like they generally do. They go into the victims. And then on the other hand, when it's the opposite, if he would have killed her, if he would have walked into the wrong apartment and killed her, would we be talking about any of this?
Oh, no.
And he says, you know what, I work for Uber. I've been working 16 hours, and I thought it was the wrong, apartment.
Wrong apartment.
And I just happened to walk into her apartment and, hit her with something and killed her.
Yeah,
it would have been a murder. They would have, said that he's a predator.
Yeah,
right.
That's it.
He'll probably be in trial by now.
Oh,
yeah, that's all she wrote for that.
Yeah, so
man, that's crazy. And then we'll talk a little bit about, let's talk about the issue when we talk about our community and losing trust, trust in the community. We'll talk a little bit about mentorship, and when I talk about mentorship, I always like to leave and at least talk a little bit about some things that are going to be like solutions And one of the things that we've talked about quite often, obviously, is the whole issue of mentorship and the importance of mentorship, and how, as a community, we're seeing, what we're seeing with what's happening in our government and what's happening, in these things that are playing out in front of our eyes, and the unfairness of it, is that I think that basically we have to come to the realization that, there's a lot that we need to do in our own community, because unfortunately they're not going to do those things for us.
Right.
And one of the things that I want to make sure that we do in our community, which I feel like I'm a huge supporter of mentoring and mentoring the youth in our community, and trying to, and we always talk about formal and informal mentorship. There's some people who really could be good mentors in our community, but oftentimes our community aren't allowing those individuals to be mentors, because maybe they've done something in their life that they feel like they don't give them the opportunity. Right. We tend to drift towards people sometimes that have ulterior motives, instead of just allowing. There's so many jewels and gems in our community that we basically kind of brush off, just simply because there's people with programs, there's people who are doing things, and then the community is not really behind them and supporting them.
Right.
It's like, okay, how many times on the radio have I heard about Kavanaugh? How many times on the radio have I heard about Geiger? That gets your attention. You're willing to get on the radio. You're willing to do whatever you do to come out and talk about that. But how many people do, if we get out and we say, hey, man, we got this mentor program to help these kids, will you get on board? They're not going to do any of that. They're not. You're not going to hear. You're not going to get their interest. So we have to break this cycle of the way that we've been socialized and the way that we deal with issues, and stop making it all the time about problems and not talking about the solutions. You know what I mean? I understand. We know where we are.
Right.
You see what I mean? But what are we going to do to make things a little bit better, instead of always blaming it? There's two things can be true, and that's what's wrong with our community, is we think that basically it has to be one or the other. Yes, you can still understand the fact that there are some systematic issues that are affecting our ability to be successful in our communities. But we also have to understand that we have to take responsibility and do more to take care of our own people, right? I'm not going to go around begging someone to take care of me, right? I'm not going to go out there going out like that. I think that, and I'm like, if I understand you're going to do that, I'm going to get mine, and we need to start figuring out ways that we can take care of ourselves, right? And I know, Marcus, that basically you're a young man, and I know that you kind of have your pulse to some of the younger generation, as far as the issue of our generation. We talked about people in our generation mentoring people from your generation, and obviously younger. So my thing is that, what is your outlook in general on mentorship? Do you think it's something that's lacking in our community, or do you think it's something that, our community, is it because people are not given the opportunities, or not focusing on individuals who are willing to mentor? How do you see it?
Well, honestly, the way I see it now is, it's not that we are lacking in our communities as far as there being mentors, but I believe what is happening is we are getting stuck in traditional ways of mentoring. And what I mean by that is, it used to be the idea that knowledge is power, or rather applied knowledge is power. We live in a day and time now where I like to call it the microwave generation, where we need things now quick, here, fast, and in a hurry. And so what needs to happen is not necessarily the applied knowledge, because you can sit here with a brother and talk to him days on end. You can offer him a 10-year plan on how to be a millionaire, but the problem is, unless you're able to grab his attention, he's not going to follow through with that. So what has to happen between this gap between younger generation and older generation is that, well, for one, the younger generation does need to find an identity. An identity on who we want to be and what we need to see ourselves as a matter of fact, what we represent. It's easy to find a brother that's willing to represent a Jordan just because of the icon and what Jordan has produced, but it's almost harder to find a Mr. Zulu Ali right down the street where I can actually communicate with him and he can represent me as a person. Now, on the flip side of that, where we have the older generation, is that the older generation are still in a place and a portion of influence. to the community. And what needs to happen is that gap needs to be bridged by giving the youth a place or an outlet to change their reality. Because right now we're stuck in this reality where I can go outside right now in a black hoodie and a bag of Skittles and I can get shot today. But to put us in a reality where we're in a different zone where we're not focusing on that is all that we need. Just focusing our attention on something else than our current reality is what's going to get us to make that change. Again, changing our identity and how we see ourselves is the biggest solution to this problem.
And I agree with you. I think the youth don't have any identity whatsoever, and then they living in this chaotic world where they seeing all of this stuff. The stuff we talking about on the radio station is what they see in their everyday life, you know, or they hear about in their everyday life, and they even more confused now than they ever been confused in our generation or us growing up. And I think that there is a gap where the parents is not pushing the kids to any betterment whatsoever because they're still stuck in their own rut. And then you have the youth. The youth is like they need to find. I think in the African American community, I think that they need to be inclined to study about their culture and understand where they come from and understand the greatness of it in order for them to find an identity. Their identity takes them nowhere. They can't find anything. It's chaos. So they don't know nothing. But I think it's good for us to kind of go back and teach them about where they came from, whether it's ancient Africa, Egypt, whatever it is, in order for them to understand the greatness in which they come from, you know. And by understanding that, I think that they will be able to find themselves, you know, find out, okay, look, I come from this. I didn't come from this, or I didn't come from that. But right now, they can't look back and say, I come back from my mom's, but she gang bang too. You know, I look at my dad, he gang bang too. And so they have nowhere to find, you know, and then the parents is not teaching because the parents is on a grind every single day. You know, when does it come time when we sit down at that dinner table and be able to discuss, okay, how was your day at school today? You know, that's not done in the home anymore. You know, it's just like grind here, eat the food, go to bed, let's go. That day is over with, you know. And I think that we need to really crack down on our youth and basically give them some type of direction so they can, you know, be able to see what the future looks like.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with, if I can be completely honest, is I think that we have a community that is increasingly have some degree of self-hatred. And I think that goes back to the whole idea of when you're talking about teaching someone about who they really are.
Right.
And I think that, you know, when you, and it's almost like, you know, how do you get back to, you can have as many mentors as you possibly can. However, if the mentorship does not in some way properly redirects our children in a way in which we begin to start loving ourselves, we have so much distrust for each other. And a lot of the distrust is in many ways related to the way that we have been socialized, and we begin to believe sometimes the things that other individuals have programmed us to believe. You know, and so that's one of the bigger things, is that how can you get individuals in a room to work together to move towards a better place when, number one, we don't trust each other. Number two, when we do have leadership, we're looking for leaders that are primarily they have to be accepted by the people who might not necessarily have our best interest, right?
Yeah.
So in other words, you got to come in. When you come in, you have to come in with with endorsements. And if it's not endorsements, if you're not endorsed sometimes by the people who don't necessarily have your best interest, then they don't want to hear from you.
Right.
So it's just like, for example, when we start, as soon as you're given a certain position that allows you, that's based upon a consensus of people in general, then that's the people that you recognize as your leaders. And sometimes the people that we recognize as the leaders are people that have been endorsed by people who might not necessarily be from our own community.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so by doing that, it'll never change. Sometimes we don't even elect our own leaders. The people that we recognize the most are people who are most recognized by people outside of our own community.
Right.
You know, like I have a really good friend of mine who's a great lawyer. You know, he's been extremely successful at being an attorney. He's built his own building, you know, great lawyer. And he's never been recognized by any of the local minority or regular bar associations, right? However, there's other individuals who have been elected to be judges who, as attorneys, did not have necessarily a stellar career. They just ran for office and were elected. And those individuals have been recognized from the Bar Association just because they were elected, and that kind of gives them that endorsement.
Right.
So you have one individual who's on the street, on the grind, helping people on a daily basis. And the other individual who the only thing he really brings to the table is that he was elected to a prestigious office. And one is being recognized by the community when the other one is not.
It's not.
And that's the way that that's how we kind of socialize ourselves to choose who our leaders are. And even that was the way it was during slavery, you know.
Right. I mean, and also I think one of the biggest thing is also finding that leader or that person that is willing to actually die for what they believe in, actually have a passion for the community, that he's willing to put his life on the line. All the greatest leaders of past time have been willing to put down their lives to be able to protect and uphold their communities. And I think that is the hardest part. I know for me as an individual that looks to actually uplift the community, my biggest fear is that being that person that be willing to die and put his passion on the line, you won't be recognized until years later, generations later. When Martin Luther King died, he died 20 years before they actually made him a federal holiday. So the idea that most kids nowadays, most in the younger generation, they want to be that great influence. They want to be in that position or in that platform where they can give people hope. The problem is that we're afraid of what comes with it, because sometimes it's not even just the people outside of your community. Sometimes it's the people inside the community as well that are going against you, and that's where we go in the whole topic of loyalty and trust. So I think the biggest thing is being able to get past that fear, someone that's willing to actually put that fear to the side and say, hey, I'm going to stand on the forefront, and either you guys follow with me or we go to a different direction. I think that's the biggest thing.
But I think also they don't see nobody out in the forefront. They're giving us that guidance or that leadership, you know. And a lot of people say, well, we don't need no leadership. But I think with these kids, they're more visual than anything else.
Right.
I mean, when they can follow a rapper and they can stay on Instagram all day long,
Exactly.
and Facebook all day long, following these rappers, I'm quite sure that they can follow somebody in the hood that's doing something that is positive. But if they're not presented with that individual to show them or guide them, then they have nothing to fall back on. Now, if Big Ratneck pull up every Christmas and he unload the truck with toys, and he the known gang member or known drug dealer, and he unloads the truck with all these toys inside of the projects, then who they gonna look up to? They're going to look at Big Ratneck because they want to be like him.
Right.
But see, that's why, and it goes back to, I appreciate Zulu Ali, because, there's a program every year with the apartment complex. I do the mentoring here. He'll come through, and they're able to see a leader in him because he come through and he giving up the turkeys and everything. So they can look at him and they can see not so much, they won't, you can't say where they equate him to a leader, but they're able to see a face or identify a face that's there for them when they need it. You see what I'm saying?
Exactly.
But they don't see that in the hood. They don't have no guidance. They don't have people that they can reflect on other than what they see in the neighborhood.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, our leadership, man, is when it comes, and that's another thing too, is that basically we need to make sure that we begin to start figuring out ways that we're not limiting the whole idea of leadership to specific individuals.
Right.
And then you have people who are fighting and competing over who's going to be the leader. There's a lot of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to get away with that, and our community is splintered just simply because there has been so much effort from outside sources to make those things happen. And I think that and then when you have leaders that are doing something positive, we're very always suspect of those particular leaders.
Exactly.
When they come out, it's like, I know if he was doing something, then they would, what is he doing for the community? Or if he was doing something, then he wouldn't be able to do this or he wouldn't be able to do that. And we have to get beyond that and allow individuals who aren't necessarily endorsed by outside of the community to be able to come in and really do things. We're not doing that. You know, we really aren't, and we really have to get to a point, because if we don't, you know, that's kind of when you go to other communities, you never hear that. When you if I can give you the name of a community, you tell me who the leader is. If I say who's the leader of the Native American community, who's the leader of the Korean community, who's the leader of the Chinese community, and even if I ask somebody from that community who they are not. They don't. That's not how they go. That's not how they get down.
Yeah, got you.
You know, so we have to change that, man.
Yeah.
You got to come back, Marcus, so we can finish. We'll have to start out with that topic.
Yeah.
Yes,
but
sir.
I appreciate you coming in, and I appreciate everyone from tuning in. And on behalf of the Justice Watch crew, Rosa Nunez, Michael Bilal Clark, and Dr. Akilis Bashir, thanks for everybody for tuning in. Until next week, we'll see you at the same time, same place, same channel. Until then, stay blessed.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, 106.5 FM, and now 102.3 FM.
Your NBC Sports Radio update starts now.
The Lions are roaring. I'm Jeff Nathanson. Tonight's NFL game on NBC features the